Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today we are talking about a topic that is so important. It comes up so often with founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and that is the topic around how do you balance aggressively growing your business and enjoying your life at the same time? Is that possible? Can it happen? How do you do it? Yes, we are essentially talking about work-life balance, but I think this is a question where, especially if you're in a high growth phase, you're either forced into thinking about, you've either completely let go by the wayside and you're really struggling, or you are at this point in time where you're deciding, what are my growth goals? How do they fit in with my life? And is it possible to achieve that figure you're trying to achieve and keep all your other responsibilities going at the same time? I think this is something that people really feel and made apparent of if you have family, if you have children, if you have care responsibilities. But everybody has some version of this where you're thinking, how aggressively can I grow whilst enjoying your life? Now, I want to just say off the bat of this, every single person is different, every single business is different, everybody's circumstances are different, and that will massively dictate what is possible. Also, privilege comes into this hugely, as with everything. So the level of privilege you have, both in society, both in your life, both just generally, massively influences, what you can do with the amount of points that I'm going to describe to you below. I'd suggest today that you get a pen and paper out and you work along with me as I'm sort of saying things, that you write down whatever comes to mind. But just off the bat, think about, what is the ideal solution for what you want? Because many of us are ambitious and they want to achieve something, but you're also trying to, live this life. And what I would say is, for most businesses, I would say for 95% of businesses, you can achieve a really nice balance. You can still aggressively grow and enjoy your life. There is 5% who, depending on the level of aggressive growth you want to achieve, sometimes there is a lot of sacrifice that happens where actually for a year or 2 year or a 5 year period, there isn't a lot of balance. And I don't think that's spoken about very much. But for the majority of people listening to this episode, I do believe with your business model, you can enjoy the process and you can still aggressively grow. But it does require a lot of intention. It requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence, and it requires a lot of checkpoints for you to get there. So let's go for it. What does balance feel like to you? This is the first point that you have to figure out in your head, because everybody's idea of what this feeling of balance looks like is completely different. So for what one person's vision of balance is the other person's complete idea of chaos. And so you need to define this in your head. You probably also need to define this within yourself, your partner if you have one, or someone that you live with, and then your family, your wider family if you have them. I'm going to mention things throughout this episode where some things might not apply to you. Please just take whatever does fit for you. But what does balance feel like for you? And really aligning, does that fit with what your partner thinks? Because sometimes you're going to get a difference of opinion there. So sometimes what your version of balance looks like and what their version of balance looks like is different. So you really have to try and come up with what is the collective and what is the individual version. And then I need you to really think about, where can you block off time? So what time is just devoted to business? What time is just devoted to work? What time is just devoted to family or, commitments or hobbies or whatever you want to kind of call the different areas of your life? But where can you block off time that is actual work time? Because often what happens is, sometimes when people are struggling with this, is that they have so much work time that it's too much, even though they think it's too little, or they have too little of it that it's inevitable that they feel the way they do. And so really understanding, what is the time commitment that you actually have available to you, and being really honest and open with that. Because sometimes people will say, well, I've got 4 days a week or 3 days a week or 5 days a week. But when you actually look into it, you haven't got a full day. Some of you will have certain responsibilities that means you can only be around from 9 till, maybe 3, and then you might get an hour in the evening or something. But really understanding, for an hourly amount, how many hours in a week or a month do you actually have to work? And once you get that figure, there's a lot more that we can do with that figure that actually is useful, rather than you just thinking in your head, well, I work 4 days a week. Because if you work 4 days a week, but your 4 days is 2 hours a day, and I'm not shaming you for that, because there's many people who do that, and that's great. But you versus someone who works 4 days a week but works like a 16-hour day, that is two very different capability and like things that you can work out what you're trying to achieve on. I also need you to then think about, where can you be 100% present? And what that means is, where can you be 100% present with the people that matter to you that you feel like you're missing out on now? Because a lot of people get to this point and they're like, something is not going right, or you're dropping the ball on something. And often that means home. And you think, oh, I want to spend more time with X, Y, and Z person. I want to be able to go and do the shopping for someone, or you want to be able to, lie on the floor and play with your children and not have to think about work, not have your emails in your hand, not have the phone in your hand. Like, where is it that you can be 100% present with the people that matter? And this is really important, because what I've found and what other people have found who I've worked with is that people don't actually need tons and tons of time necessarily of 100% of your presence. But when you give them 100%, it is so much more meaningful. So if you can start communicating to people, look, I can give you 3 hours of my undivided attention on a Thursday evening, that can mean so much to people if they know in their heads that they have this checkpoint of so-and-so, or, May is going to be available at that point, and she's going to make that a non-negotiable for her. That is really powerful for helping people to understand your mission, to buy into it, to feel like they kind of get where you're going, and for them to also feel seen and heard themselves. So really identify, where can you be 100% present? Where are you going to be with them, but you might not be 100% plugged in? Where are you going to work? Like, really understanding the time you have, because the one thing that isn't going to change is how much time people have, in the sense of you have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. And so that doesn't change. How you spend the time does change. And some of you have got more ability to scope that out than others. Some of you are dictated in, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this because I've got commitments. If you are someone who doesn't actually have any commitments, and you are actually someone who can design their 24 hours, really, really be diligent with yourself and discipline yourself to actually follow through with what you're saying you're going to do. Because you have that gift of being able to have a pretty much free run of what you want to do. If, for those of you who have children or care responsibilities or other things in place where you do have specific things you have to do, then you need to prioritize even more so getting really clear on what these blocks of time are. The other thing I want you to really get clear on is, what are you willing to sacrifice? Different people are willing to sacrifice different things. For example, some people are willing to sacrifice certain friendships, whereas other people, that's 100% a no-no. Some people are happy to sacrifice, going to the gym, and they'll go to the gym 2 days a week instead of going 7 days a week. But for other people, that's a no-no because they need to in order to keep their mental health on track. Like, you need to fully understand, what are you willing to sacrifice to hit your aggressive growth goal, and what are you not? A good way of looking at this is to work out, what have you previously sacrificed and how did it feel? What did you previously sacrifice where it went really wrong, or people were really hurt, or you felt like you were really shit parent, mother, carer, friend, sister, brother, whatever? Like, what feels good and what doesn't feel good to sacrifice? Because if we live in, the real world and the hard world that we're doing today, like, there is this element of you do sacrifice something. And people saying that you can have access to everything and you can have it all the time. I mean, some people, due to privilege, might be able to make that happen, but the majority of people can't. And when we push this message that we can have everything all of the time, it's like, well, is that really helping us? Or is it better for us to get really clear on, I can have it all in the space of a week or in a month, but maybe not every single day, all the time. So what are you willing to sacrifice? I'm now going to just talk you through a couple of areas that I've seen where this works really well. So I have seen it where some people have said they're going to work 5 days a week, but they work in the morning only, and then in the afternoon they're like a free bird to kind of do whatever they need to do. For some people's growth goals, that isn't going to work. For some people, it's that they will work Monday to Friday, and their head is probably going to be down from, 9 till 7 maybe pretty much every day. But they're committed on a Saturday and Sunday to be 100% with the people that they are choosing to be around. And they verbally create agreements with people to say, I will be with you at X, Y, and Z point. Another thing I've seen work well is where people put certain blocks of time into their day. So, for example, if you have, I don't know, maybe an elderly relative or someone in your community that you need to or like to be there for, some people will say, right, I'm going to take a 2 hour lunch break or a 3 hour lunch break every single day. And in that time, I eat, but I also go and do some other bits and pieces that helps fill my cup and helps make me feel like I've got my life together. Maybe they go to a gym class, maybe they go to a therapy session, maybe they do whatever. And then they come back to work. That can help people feel really like, oh, I've got this. Like, I'm managing to do both of it. And I think what's really interesting is where I've seen this work well for people is where people really prioritize the fact that it doesn't have to be long periods of time. So often the most impact in terms of feeling like you've got balance is often when it might only be an hour, it might only be an afternoon a week, but that can help people feel like they've gotten so much back into their lives. It might be that you schedule in some time to go and do your food shopping, because for some people, not having fresh food in the house and them ordering takeaway is a sign that their business is really growing and things are growing fast, but they're not present at home. And so thinking about, well, are you going to get a food delivery service? Are you going to get meal prepared service? Are you getting a chef? Are you getting a meal box delivery? Like, what are you getting? And that's going to, what options you have is going to depend on where you're at in your life and your business and what privilege you have got. But it's like, what is the solution? Do you still want to go and do your food shop? And if you do still want to go and do your food shop, there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to have that plotted into your weekly schedule or your monthly schedule. Next up, what are you going to do at the point in which the busy wave comes? What I mean by the busy wave is lots of you with big growth goals will resonate with this idea that sometimes you can kind of get into a flow of stuff going on. And then other times there's this massive wave that hits you of work, of opportunity, of things to do, things not to do. It might be a certain time of year. And you're like, everything just comes off the rails and you can't get back on track because you are just so overwhelmed by what's just happened. And you need to have a clear understanding of what are you going to do when the wave comes. I would suggest that you have a clear understanding of this is a usual week or month, and this is a week or month when things really step up. And what I also suggest you do is you therefore then communicate that with the people who are affected by it. And you show them visually, or you say to them and you explain to them, like, look here, this is the situation I want. This is what might happen if something gets really busy. I'm going to inform you when that does happen. And really helping people feel like they're on board with you is important, because where I've seen it work really badly is when people and their entrepreneurial journey is so separate from the people who they spend the most time with that it's never going to work, because there's such this distance. If you can get people on board with you and can also live in your world and understand that, like, at sometimes you're not going to be sort of showing up as you wish to, that's where you can actually create something that is meaningful and actually works. The other thing I want you to have a think about is you coming up with a point of sort of, I don't know, relevance, that's not the right word, but you understanding when to stop. When is enough enough? That's what you need to figure out. And I want you to understand that from a day perspective, a month perspective, and a year perspective. When is enough enough? And sometimes you have to put your foot down and say, do you know what? That thing isn't going to happen in the business, or I can't go to that event, or I can't show up for this person because I need to be with my family, or I need to be doing X, Y, and Z, or I need to just look after myself. Like, this doesn't have to be about other people. It can be about you and saying, I do not have the capacity to do this. But what I need you to understand is, what is the point? Like, what is a pointer where you know, okay, May, we've hit that point. You need to take some time to look after yourself. And the idea with this is that you select something that isn't the point in which you burn out, or the point in which everything becomes too much and you want to throw the towel in and you never want to do it again. That is not what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to you identifying a point before that happens. So, for example, for me, it is in Q4. So the rest of the year, I don't work Fridays. In Q4, I tend to work a maximum of like 2 Fridays in Q4. And they're often like in person, or it's like some kind of work where I'm delivering something. If I, for any reason, got to a month at any point in Q4 and had worked for the second consecutive week on a Friday, I know there's something right, like not good, not right. It can't, like, that's just not going to work. And so I know that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this has to shift. And I will put things in place to make sure that isn't actually going to happen. And that is because I've pre-planned a lot of stuff and I understand what certain outputs of work does to me. And that's really important, that you start to actually look at this stuff objectively and say, what needs to stop? It will also happen if I am very happy within a month to do a couple of late nights. If I'm working on a project or something that really I'm inspired by and it's something internally, it won't be client stuff, but it would be internally, I'm quite happy to do sort of 1 or 2 really late nights a month. If I ever got into a pattern where I'd done 4 late nights on the trot and I was wanting to do a 5th, that was when I put my foot down and said, this isn't happening. 3's the max. And to be honest, it's more like it's 2's the max over the month, separate evenings, but certainly not. If it was something that was consecutive, I would know instantly that there's something wrong. Either something wrong in my personal life, something wrong in business, or my priorities are wrong. And therefore, I step in with myself and I'm almost managing myself. And I think that's what I'm trying to suggest to you, is that you need to start managing yourself. I'm sorry if you're watching this. My nose is running. Why does my nose run the whole time? I don't know. It just runs all year, every year. Never when I'm not recording or on calls. It just kicks in. It's really great. I think it's the heat of the lights, if I'm honest. I don't know why, but I have lights on me and I think that's what it is. So what is your stop points? When are you like, actually, yeah, this is too much, but you need to be able to identify them before you're in the situation in order for you to be able to identify them when you are in the situation. I also want you to think about, how can you enjoy the journey? This is really important. So how can you enjoy the journey you're on? What do you enjoy about the journey? Have a list of what I enjoy about the journey, things I can do to enjoy the journey, things I don't enjoy. There will be certain parts of business and entrepreneurship that you really enjoy, and there's certain parts that you don't. There's also certain things you can do to enjoy the journey. So that might be going out for dinner after you've had a busy day. So many people will have a busy day work-wise, then go home and veg out on the sofa. Nothing wrong with that. I love that. I do that. But you might find that actually, if you have a busy day, but then you go out for dinner afterwards and kind of round off the day on a different note, that might actually feed you more and build more energy into you than actually going home and vegging out on the couch. You need to come up with some key pointers. You don't need 20, but you need a couple where you're figuring out, how can you actually enjoy the journey with the constraints you've got going on right now. Not what anybody's telling you should do or you should enjoy. What do you actually enjoy, and how do you enjoy the journey? The other thing I want you to really think about is, are you aware of what is happening? So are you someone who can identify how you feel at any given point? That's really hard for human beings to do. So for many of us, the answer is no. The next question to that is, are you aware of what's happening when business gets difficult or when the balance completely goes? And again, this is really important because most people, the answer is no. They can only see it on reflection. Some people can never see it. Some people see it after like 3 months perspective, 6 months perspective, a month, a couple of weeks. Some people can see it daily. That is something that you need to work on, and I would suggest is something that you build on as the year goes on and as the years go by. That is massively linked to emotional intelligence. So if your EQ is high, you will find that a lot easier than those people who, if you find it really tricky, it might be that your emotional intelligence is kind of on the lower end of the spectrum and that you're trying to like build that up. The reason that you need to be aware of what is happening is that that will allow for this whole thing that I'm suggesting to you to actually use your toolkit and use this kind of approach of objectively looking at your own actions. That will become possible at the point in which you can identify what is happening. But for a lot of people, they will get into habits where they end up on this 3-month run or a 2-month run and then get to the end of it and say, God, I can really see now what was going on there. And whilst they're in it, they really struggle. And I'm not suggesting you have to get that right 100% of the time. I'm just suggesting that if you start to look deeper and you start to really try and work out what it is that you're feeling, what are you experiencing, what is it that you are actually dealing with, you can then provide your solution of how you're going to balance things in a more objective way that will lead to more success. So I've got a couple of other pointers for you to figure out things on that you can write things down to. So, what is your yes-no matrix? This is something you really need to understand. And what I mean by that is, how do you make decisions on what you're saying yes and no to? So if you are aggressively growing your business, you are going to be in a position where you have lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities, lots of things you can do, lots of things you can say yes to, lots of things you could attend, lots of people you could speak to. You have to get into the habit of being able and comfortable to say no, and you have to know when is right to say yes and when is not. Most people struggle with this so much. And the reason they're burnt out is often because of this, because they constantly say yes, or they're constantly kind of telling themselves why they should be at X, Y, and Z thing. So you kind of get a piece of paper when you're like, if this is yes, then it's going to be X, Y, and Z. If it's no, then it's X, Y, and Z. So, particular events. Are you going to events or you're not? What networking is a yes? What networking is a no? Are coffee chats on the table or are they not? If you're aggressively growing your business, I highly suggest that you say no unless you're looking for like investment or you purposely have a real clear understanding as to why you're doing them. What is a yes and a no in the sense of personal stuff? So if something comes up and you have a child who goes to school and there's some kind of school event on, are you saying that every single event for school you want to attend? If so, then that's going to have to go in the yes category. If it's going in the no category, it's unlikely, but you might want to put it in the maybe category. If it's going in the maybe category, what are the parameters around it? And I know this will seem very kind of orchestrated, but it kind of needs to be. Like, you need to fully understand what is a yes-no situation. What even in-person meetings? Do you need to take every in-person meeting? Can you take the in-person meeting online? That can go in your yes-no matrix, but really getting clear on what is a yes, what is a no, what is a maybe. And you need to have some things in that no category. You can't just list out tons of stuff in the yes and say, oh, well, I want to do everything. You need to objectively look and say, what is actually adding value? What actually makes sense? Can you delegate someone else to go and attend something? If you struggle with these exercises, you need to go, in my opinion, and speak to someone and work with someone like me or someone else who can help provide a different perspective and go through with you and help you create an understanding of what is a yes and what is a no. Because if you do this piece of work, your life can really improve and you can enjoy the process of building the business while you're aggressively growing it, yada, yada, yada. If you don't, the kind of knockoff of this and what can happen for people is this is when people go into the point of like not even being able to continue with their business or throwing the towel in and saying, I can't do this anymore. Or, it's where co-founders, one continues on and the other doesn't. Like, this has to be real priority for you to identify in your head where do you stand with this stuff. Next thing, listing out your non-negotiables. What is an absolute non-negotiable? So if having dinner with your partner on a Thursday evening is a non-negotiable, write that. But what you also need to understand is if something comes up on a Thursday evening and you really think you need to stay, you have to abide by your non-negotiables. Yes, there might be a time, 1 in 100, where actually you need to switch it because you need to. But if you're writing something on your non-negotiable list, hold yourself to account and gift yourself the joy of being able to say what it is that you're going to do and actually stick to your non-negotiables list. Because if you start violating them and you start abusing them, the value that you hold in yourself becomes very difficult for your brain to kind of fully weigh up. It's like, well, are we doing this or are we not? Because this is something you can train your brain to do. Like, I have done this for years and years and years, and now it gets to the point where it's easy for me and I don't actually think about a lot of it. And it's fascinating. When I was reflecting on doing this episode, it really caused me to think about things because I now do some of this completely instinctively without me realizing, and things will naturally be a yes or a no. And I don't have to go through this whole matrix and this whole process. It's just, I know it's a yes or a no. So this might feel a bit prescriptive right now, and it might feel very heavy and very like, oh, why are you making this all just another thing to do? But if you commit to this and you actually help train your brain to look out for you, it will do it automatically eventually. So see it as an investment in your time, because it really is. I also want you to create what your warning/lookout list is. What I mean by that is a list of pointers and signs that you're heading either for burnout, for unhappiness, for feeling unbalanced, for feeling unfulfilled, to feel like things are just out of control. What is a list of things on there? It can be feelings, it can be behaviors, it can be habits, it can be lack thereof. Do you stop going to the gym? Do you struggle? Do you use certain language? Like, I can even tell for some people it's certain language they will use. Certain people will use the word whatever. They will say, oh, whatever, I don't know, or whatever. Like, different language can be used when we're in certain feelings. Is it how you look? So maybe you always put makeup on every day, but then you stop not. That will be a sign that you have to think about, okay, there's a warning sign here. What is our plan to move forward from this? And again, I know this sounds very prescriptive, but this is really important as you build your business. If you want aggressive business growth and you want to also maintain a work-life balance, you have to decide that you can have them both, but you are prepared to emotionally intelligently look at your life, at the people in your life, at your actions, at your time, and figure out ways of just having clarity. Because often when we feel like there's no balance, it's often a lack of clarity of what we're actually trying to achieve or what we're actually trying to do. So figuring out on that, what's on that warning list, what's on that lookout list, what's on that, like, oh, okay, something's not quite right there. That's really, really important. Is it the time that you go to bed? So when things are balanced and when things are feeling good, do you go to bed at X time? Maybe you go to bed at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. And then when things are feeling unbalanced, is it that you go to bed at 8 p.m. or is it that you go to bed at like 2 a.m.? It doesn't necessarily, you decide what the kind of metrics are, but you understanding what are the lookout things, because that will really help you to figure out other things. There are another kind of 10 things we could talk about on this topic. We're not going to, because actually I think you've got a lot there to be getting on with, for you to work through, to think about. If you have co-founders, if you have business partners, if you have other people in the business, I really would suggest that you all do this exercise. You come together, you talk about it, you look at what's similar, what isn't, and really use this as a basis for being able to figure out how you can support one another, what the warning signs are for one another, and does it all, like, is it compatible? And that's something you then need to look at if you are, business partners, if maybe you're a family business, whatever. Just do this exercise and actually all kind of buy into it, because you can get a lot from it. I'm going to leave you for today. I've enjoyed spending time with you, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please go and do the kind of further work from this, because this can help you a lot. I also just want to leave you a note to say, if you are aggressively growing your business, well done. It is going to be worth it. Keep going and give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to not always get it right, to sometimes get it wrong, to enjoy the good times, to lean in when it gets really tricky. But you don't have to go this alone, and you aren't alone. And if you've listened to this and you thought, I need to take this more seriously and I really want to get this figured out and I really want to make more of an effort with this, I can come and help you, right? I can help you. We can meet. We don't have to work together long term. It can be, a half day. It can be a full day. We can really spend time in getting this clear in your head, amongst other things, about making sure that your business strategy is aligned, making sure that your output and what you're responsible for is aligned. Like, this is what we've done today is like the first piece, but there's actually sort of 2 or 3 or 4 other pieces, depending on what your goals are, to help you make sure that you do have this balance and that you can maintain the balance. So you know where I am if you need anything. Come and see me on Instagram. You can email us, support@mayjames.com, if you want more information on working together. But you can come and find me on Instagram, where I hang out all day, most days, at may.james_. And I will speak to you then. Take care. Bye.